안녕하세요 여러분, 김지윤입니다. 오늘 좀 특별한 인터뷰를 준비해봤습니다. 여러분 잘 알고 계시는 기업 팔란티어, 이 팔란티어의 국방부분 총괄 책임자 마이크갤러거 전 의원입니다. 제가 전 의원이라고 한 것은 이분이 원래 미국의 연방 하원의원 출신이거든요. 2024년 4월 갑자기 하원의원직을 조기 사임을 하고 6월부터 팔란티어에 조인을 했습니다. 굉장히 의미심장한 커리어 전환인데요. 과연 마이크갤러거 전 의원이 팔란티어로 옮긴 이유는 무엇이고, 또 그것이 팔란티어의 어떤 사업적인 정책 변환을 의미하는 것인지, 그리고 또 이분이 워낙에 안보 분야 전문가였거든요. 최근에 국제정세라든지 안보에 대해서 어떻게 생각하고 있는지 한번 질문을 던져보려고 합니다. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are one of the most prominent politicians in Congress. I actually introduced you when I was making a clip about the TikTok ban. And it was quite a surprise that you stepped down from the leading the select committee in China in the House, and then suddenly joined the Palantir. That's such a big shift of career.
First, I tend to think of myself as a China realist, which is to say if the Chinese Communist Party is taking steps to undermine or overturn the free world or the US-led global order and subvert our alliances, particularly our alliance with South Korea and other key Asian allies, that we should stop it, that we should take steps to bolster near-term deterrence. And I do think that, the balance of conventional hard power in the Indo-Pacific is sort of the most important variable that we should look like. As for my own journey, I always knew when I went into politics was a unexpected detour for me. I was kind of shaping my career as a national security professional, an academic. I'd done my PhD in international relations and kind of wanted to be, float in and out of government in national security roles, but had the opportunity to run for Congress at a very young age. I was the youngest man in Congress when I got elected. But I always knew that it wasn't going to be a career for me. But kind of really to the point of your question, I really felt on the Armed Services Committee and chairing a cyber commission and chairing the China committee that I was seeing the character of modern warfare change. Some of the things we were seeing on the battlefields of Ukraine, in the Middle East, sort of gray zone aggression in the Indo-Pacific, I kind of felt like I needed to go back to school, that I needed to really upskill and go deep into what was happening at the intersection of technology and traditional defense and modern warfare. And so the opportunity to go work for Palantir was perfect because Palantir is at the leading edge of how technology can support the warfighter and how advances in AI and software-defined warfare are changing how we fight and how we deter.
Well, for a security person, I think it's a really right choice. So you pick the Palantir because this is a company doing the data analysis. And a lot of people actually say that Palantir changed the whole modern warfare. So could you please give us some specific example how it changed the modern battlefield?
So at some level, the nature of war, its essence hasn't changed. It's all about how do you close kill chains or decision loops faster than the adversary. But I think what technology is now allowing war fighters to do is to close those kill chains much more rapidly than the adversary, if used rightly, and allow a single analyst to do the job that it used to take 300 people to do in terms of sifting through data sets collected by all sorts of different means, whether it's overhead imagery, human sources, signals intelligence. It's that integration from sensor, shooter, to actual builder of the weapon system, that connection from the battlefield to the foxhole to the factory, from the battlefield to the boardroom, that I think technology is finally making possible. We're seeing a shift towards unmanned systems, like attritable, large numbers of attritable systems, particularly on the battlefield in Ukraine. And then I think the explosion of commercial imagery and the redundant communications network that you need in order to fight and survive, because you have to assume that the enemy is going to have the ability to jam your primary comms. I think all of these things put together are kind of changing the way we fight. And the final thing I'm saying, I'm sorry to go on, notwithstanding all the fancy advances in technology, in my opinion, war is and always will be fundamentally a human endeavor. It's a contest of wills between two fundamentally human entities or organizations. Technology isn't going to change that. anytime soon.
Well, let's talk about the global affairs and international relations. I know it is the area your expertise lies in as well. A lot of people say that we are now living in a new Cold War era. This time, only difference is not the Soviet Union, but China. And of course, I believe the technological rivalry will be a key issue in this competition as well. And I also would like to hear your assessment of the current situation, how the competition between the US and China going on, and how much the threat that China is actually posing in the Indo-Pacific area.
I think it also conveys that this is a global, whole of society competition. It isn't just a military competition, it's also an economic, ideological, and technological competition. But perhaps that's what reveals what is most different between the old Cold War and the new Cold War. In the old Cold War with the Soviet Union, we never had to contemplate some form of selective economic and technological decoupling because our economies didn't really interact. What is so difficult and complex about this strategic competition with China is that we find ourselves dependent on China in critical areas, whether it's rare earth processing, whether it's basic manufacturing in critical industries. And so we have to find a way we have to, one, define the line, right? What are the areas where our dependency is unacceptable? And therefore, we're going to take steps working with our closest allies to diversify supply chains, to build resiliency economically, and ensure that the technology stack isn't dominated by China, but is indeed dominated by the West. And what are the areas below the line where, our economies are still going to interact, right? Where Wisconsin farmers are still going to sell soybeans to China. We're still going to buy, textiles from China, things like that. That's a very, very difficult question. And that's where I have the most concerns, because we did win the first Cold War in part by controlling cutting edge technology and leveraging it for economic and military power. The CCP has now learned from the Soviet Union's failure, and as a result, they're pursuing global dominance of critical technology by 2035 at the latest. This includes hypersonics, AI, quantum computing, all part of a broader strategy to dominate the global stage and dictate the terms of international engagement. So how do we fix that, right? This isn't just a matter of America waking up, investing in technology, figuring out a collaborative model between our government and our private sector because we aren't indeed a command economy, can't be and never want to be. It also means we have to create what I refer to as a allied technological industrial base. It means we need to break down barriers to collaboration with our closest allies, like the Republic of Korea, like Japan, et cetera, and ensure that we are leveraging the best talent and the best technology within the free world, and vice versa, right? That our allies can have access to the best American technology. That's how we win this competition without it devolving into war. If America's going to win this new Cold War, we aren't going to be able to do it alone. We need to do it working with trusted, capable allies and partners like Korea.
Well, you just emphasized the technological alliances with the countries like Korea and Japan. And we all understand and recognize that China is the threat in the Indo-Pacific area. But at the same time, this is an indispensable economic partnership. Well, maybe you can tell us what are the most misunderstood or underestimated the threat level of China that it can pose in the region?
First of all, I don't know what Xi Jinping plans to do. He doesn't inform me of his ambitions. We don't talk to each other. I still remain sanctioned and unable to travel to China.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But one thing I think we've learned in recent years is that we should take, world leaders in general and dictators in particular seriously when they say they're going to do a thing. We found that out with respect to Putin in Ukraine. And Xi Jinping has repeatedly said that he intends to take Taiwan by force if necessary. It would be foolish for us to discount that. And to the argument that Wall Street in America and the business elite make about China's economy limiting their ambition, I would say it's just as possible that the reverse is true. It could be the case that China's economy is struggling because she is sanction proofing that economy in order to prepare for a confrontation with the West. And there, if you examine what he says when he talks to domestic audiences and party audiences, I think that becomes pretty clear. I think the ideological and informational dimension of the competition remains poorly understood. I sort of engaged with this in the debate over TikTok. It's really hard to sort of prove or show a smoking gun of, how exactly the algorithm was tweaked in order to influence how young people view to certain historical and present day events. But there again, if you examine what the CCP says and talks about, they talk about ideological warfare and controlling short form videos, controlling the news quite frequently. And so I'm not suggesting that we should have a complete decoupling from China, nor am I diminishing what are quite remarkable technological and manufacturing accomplishments in China. I just think we can't be as dependent as we are economically and technologically on China. And we also need to enhance the balance of conventional military deterrence in the region such that if Xi Jinping is thinking about making a move on Taiwan, we have so much power deployed at the edge that he won't even think about doing it because it would be too difficult to achieve that military objective.
Well, during the election campaign, a lot of politicians actually use the TikTok. It's not just the one side, both sides actually. Although they are saying that, okay, we have to ban the TikTok because they are stealing information of American citizens, etc. But at the end of the day, when they really need it, then they use it.
And again, there, I don't diminish the accomplishments of ByteDance in building an app that is quite addictive. The problem for us in America is that it is a news source. It is increasingly the dominant news platform for young Americans. And just as we don't allow hostile foreign countries to buy TV stations or print media, newspapers in America, we can't allow an app that is controlled by a foreign power like China to be the news platform that Americans sort of see reality through. American politicians still like to use it because it's an easy way to reach voters. And it is unfortunate to me that many of my former colleagues have put that sort of political expediency ahead of the national security concerns, which were quite bipartisan. The bill that I wrote passed with an overwhelmingly bipartisan margin. Again, TikTok can, under my bill, continue to exist in America, and politicians can derive the political benefit from it so long as it's not controlled, particularly the algorithm, by ByteDance and by extension, the Chinese Communist Party. That's all we were after, preventing foreign control of any app, not just TikTok, foreign adversary control.
You just raised the issue about the American businesses still have ties with the Chinese market and Chinese government even. And I understand the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, he often framed Palantir as the defender of Western democracy and their values, and also very critical of those big tech companies in Silicon Valley for being a unpatriotic engineering elite. I don't know what you think about his comments. I also wonder if that is a core philosophy of Palantir.
Well, I mean, the core philosophy of Palantir is that we exist to defend the West, not only in a military sense, but very much, we are in the business of helping the American warfighter and our allies deter and defeat very real threats to our national security. What in the past was a controversial position, something as simple as Dr. Karp saying, America is a force for good, and the American warfighter should have access to cutting-edge commercial technology. At the time, that was a heretical position. We had major American technology companies like Google saying the opposite, saying we refuse to work with the American military. Well, because of Dr. Karp's leadership, because of Palantir's success, we've seen a sea change. And Google, to their credit, has reversed their position. Now we're seeing every major technology company in America wanting to do business with the government in general and the American military in particular. But it really took Karp being willing to stand up in the face of enormous pressure, and then Palantir succeeding against enormous odds to show that there's a way for money and talent to flow into the defense technology company and support the American warfighter. And what's really exciting to me as head of defense at Palantir, where my particular mission is making America and our partners more lethal through alliance interoperability and enabling all our mission partners to communicate and operate seamlessly as one single allied force. I'm seeing that happen in real time. Our work with NATO is a perfect example. Earlier this year, we announced work with NATO to provide an AI-enabled common operating picture that would bridge the gap between NATO's latent power and its actual fighting strength. So in theory, you have 500 million Europeans
supported by American capabilities, deterrence should be able to prevent or decisively win a conflict against 140 million Russians. But the problem is that the combined strength of our 32 member countries is less than the sum of its parts because we duplicate capabilities, we can't coordinate our forces, we don't have a common operating picture of the potential battlefield. That's a political will problem. It's also a data problem. Literally, do we all know where the good guys are and the bad guys are on the battlefield? Not if we're not using the best technology. That's where Palantir has come in. Building on some of the data sharing capabilities we've proven in Ukraine, we're now enabling secure, real-time, AI-supported coordination between our allied countries. Allied countries retain full operational control of the software. It's their capability, it's their data, but we can make sure that we have the basis to fight as one allied force and that it's truly interoperable. We have a moment in time right now where if we make the right investments and our allies make the right investments in interoperable technology, we can produce a quantum leap in capability and deterrence in the next 5 years. I fundamentally believe that.
Well, I can think that that's probably why the Palantir has been expanding its presence in Korea. So why Korea has become such a attractive and important market for Palantir? I mean, it seems like, are we going to have a war or any battle because Palantir is so interested in Korea?
Well, we're in the business of preventing war. We're in the business of
deterrence.
Exactly. So my mission in life, like literally, this sounds cheesy, but I have given myself 2 missions in life. I write it out every morning. One is to lead my family into heaven. That's my Catholic mission. And the other is to prevent World War III. But the best way of preventing a war is to be strong. You have to wage deterrence. You need to have a strong military deterrent. You need to have strong allies. But the business I am in is in preventing war. And the reason we feel that Korea is so important has less to do with just the talent and the capabilities that I talked about before. I think it's an alliance built on shared values. Korea is not only a critical partner in defending the West, but it's also living next to the threat posed to the West. When I think about what enhances deterrence, what makes the West stronger, I think it comes down to making our allies and partners more powerful and more lethal, whether it's Poland, NATO, Israel, or Korea. And that's exactly what we set out to do. We firmly believe that our allies and partners shouldn't have to choose between advanced capabilities or data sovereignty because the right architecture enables both. You can have sovereign operational control of your own data while having access to advanced US capabilities. So I think there's many more opportunities to combine Korea's manufacturing expertise with AI-enabled software to turbocharge production. That's going to help Korea build on some of your incredibly exciting manufacturing capabilities. It's going to help us in the West. It's a combination of Korea being a technology leader, a defense innovator, a manufacturing powerhouse, and on the front line of the threats we face, that makes you more than just a customer for Palantir, but really a perfect partner and co-developer. And that's why I'm really excited about Korea.
Well, it seems like we have now a little bit different primary enemies. For example, in Korea, we still have North Korea as a primary enemy. But in the case of the United States, it is China. So I can feel that the people in the Trump administration, not just Trump administration, but also Biden administration as well, they actually wanted us to take care of North Korea and then to join the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States to check and control China. So in that sense, we have a little bit different targets or enemies.
Well, I guess my main view is that one cannot sort of neatly separate the threat posed by China, however you want to describe it, competitor, adversary, whatever term of the day we're using. My own view would be it's impossible to sort of isolate that from the threat posed by China, the threat posed by Russia, et cetera. It is sort of the case, too, that, if we want to impose greater financial costs on North Korea, at some point, in order to deter their bad behavior, at some point we'd have to impose secondary sanctions on Chinese banks and businesses that provide North Korea an economic lifeline. So even in that narrow case of how you apply sanctions, you realize that these threats are connected. They're not identical, they're not monolithic, but they are in some meaningful sense connected, if that makes sense.
So it is my last question. So what is Palantir's 10-year goal?
Well, I already articulated my goal is to prevent World War III. So, there's no shortage of ambition here. Palantir is the rarest of defense companies in that we have a thriving commercial business. We're working with most major American manufacturing companies. We're working with international companies. And so my goal is to connect the work we're doing in the defense space with the work that we're doing in the manufacturing space and realize that vision that I alluded to earlier, where the decisions we're making on the battlefield, we can in real time sort of map out what that means for our ability to produce things. Our chief technology officer, Shyam Sankar, has a book coming out called Mobilize, where he talks about his mission to reindustrialize the West, rebuild the capabilities that we allowed to atrophy. Our ability just to build complex systems has atrophied. Our ability to produce less complex systems in mass has atrophied. So that's a core goal of Palantir. And I think lurking maybe behind those two goals, the goal of preserving the peace, preventing World War III, reindustrializing the West, is, let's say, a third goal. And that is to restore trust in institutions. It is a huge problem politically and practically in America if the American people don't trust our basic institutions, government and otherwise, to function. So we believe that we're at the intersection of all three of these things. It's an exciting time to be at Palantir, and we think this is just the beginning of what our company can do.
Well, it's much more ambitious goals than I thought.
I was just going to talk about like quarterly revenue targets and this or that. We're talking about saving the world.
I know. Now I decide to buy more Palantir stocks. I already have some, but I'll buy more. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And you probably wouldn't need it, but best luck with your new career. And thank you so much again.
It was an honor to be with you, Dr. Kim, and I will remain an avid listener and hope to see you in person in Korea soon.
The same here. Thank you.